Welcome to TextScroll.com. Hello, I'm Prof Brian, and this is an overview of Chapter 1 of Reading Biblical Hebrew, Introduction to Grammar. The first thing we need to do to learn to read Hebrew is to learn to read the alphabet and how to put words together. So Chapter 1 is all about the symbols and the sounds of Biblical Hebrew. For us, that means it's learning 23 consonants, 15 vowels, 3 dots, 6 weak consonant behaviors, and 3 vowel preferences. The 23 consonants are the alphabet for Biblical Hebrew. We need to learn to name them, to say their sounds, to read them, and to write them. Then there are 15 vowels, and you might wonder, why aren't they considered part of the alphabet? That's because Hebrew was first written with consonants only and no vowels, and only very much later did the scribes develop a system of representing the vowels. Because they didn't want to disturb the consonantal text, they developed a system of putting those vowels usually underneath of the consonants, occasionally above or within them. So when we start putting words together, we have to start going from right to left, and we're going to have to go from consonant to the vowel beneath it, up to the next consonant, to the vowel beneath it, and so forth. When we learn the vowels, we also want to learn to name them, to say their sound, to read them, and to write them. But we also have to pay attention to their vowel class and their vowel length. The 3 vowel classes are A class, E class, and U class. So even though I use the letters A, I, and U from an English perspective, that's A class, E class, and U class. Then we have to pay attention to their length. We have long vowels, short vowels, and slurred vowels. This is because Hebrew will write the same word in slightly different ways if it's pronounced differently. We don't do that in English. We might pronounce a word differently, like tomato versus tomato, where in the second case, I basically killed that first vowel, but we're still going to write it the same way, T-O-M-A-T-O. In Hebrew, they're going to adjust how they write it to reflect how they say it. Then there's the 3 dots, and they're dots, they all look alike, but they have different jobs. So we're going to have to learn the different environment that these dots appear in, because once we know the setting, then we'll always know which dot it is, and then we know which job it's doing. Hebrew has some letters that we call weak consonants. That's because when the structure of a word puts those consonants in a certain position, they say, I can't do what everybody else does, I need to do something different. We don't have to master all the places where those things happen. We just need to get a basic working knowledge of this consonant, this consonant, this consonant. They do these weird things. Most of the time, it's going to be when certain consonants are over a shavah, one of the vowel symbols that we're going to learn. Then there are 3 vowel preferences. And this is just basic mechanics of the mouth. For example, certain letters are called gutturals because they're made way in the back of the throat, like aleph and hey and chet and ayin. And that's also where A class vowels are made. So we're going to find that some words would normally take something besides an A class vowel, but when they have a guttural in that position, they're going to take an A class vowel anyway. You'll also learn a couple other vowel preferences, but that's the basic concept. Where the consonant is made in the mouth affects the vowel that normally is going to go with it. Okay, the first thing that you should be doing is going and learning the consonants and the vowels, and learn to know them really well and recognize them, and then move on to practice reading. There's a number of practice readings here at TextScroll.com. All the details are explained in your textbook, and then most of the takeaways are right there on page 1 of your TextScroll study sheets. Learning the Hebrew alphabet involves a lot more than just reciting the names of the letters, but that is a very good place for us to start. Once we can rattle off the names of the letters in order without really giving it much thought, that means that we have a lot of hooks to hang the rest of the information on. The rest of the information being, what do the letters sound like, how do we write them, and can we recognize them and keep them distinct from other letters. So I'm going to begin just by reading through the alphabet, and that way you will have heard the pronunciation of the name of each letter. We have Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Chet, Tet, Yod, Kaf, Lamed, Mem, Nun, Samech, Ayin, Pei, Tsadi, Kof, Resh, Sin, Shin, and Tav. A good way to commit something to memory is to put it to music. Here are 3 different songs that you can choose from as a way of studying the Hebrew alphabet. One is to the tune of Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, which is also the ABC song in English, also Deep in the Heart of Texas, and then Yankee Doodle. What I'm going to do at the moment is just click through all of the slides slowly. You can come back later to this point in the video and put your sound on mute and go through whichever song that you choose at the pace that you like. And that's a great way for you to work on studying the alphabet. You can see the pattern that we have is that the top line gives you the regular words to the song, and below that we have the Hebrew characters, and then below the Hebrew characters we have the names of the letters, and that's what you will actually be singing as you go through, but you can be looking at the character while you are doing it. The goal here again is just to be able to say all the names of the Hebrew letters accurately in order and to know them very well, and then we can start adding more pieces to our learning process. So the thing that I'm going to suggest next is that you work on writing the alphabet. In your workbook there's a place for you to copy the letters of the alphabet, but just copying the letters doesn't necessarily make you learn them, right? You can copy them a long time without really digesting them. So you want to make it a learning activity and not just a filling in of space on the page. And the thing that you want to do is as you write the letter, you want to say the name of the letter out loud and you want to say the sound that it makes. So this is the original interface for TextScroll. This is the newer one that we are developing. And if you go to Learning Activity 1, it will show you how to write all the letters. So as you're doing your workbook, you want to be here. So all of the letters in each column are a button, and if you click on it, you will see how to write the letter. It shows you the sequence of the strokes and the direction of the strokes. And if you are going to be learning script as well, then there's a box below for script letters to be shown. Script in Hebrew doesn't mean like it does in English. It doesn't mean you're going to connect all of the letters. It just means that the letters are more curved. Here we'll do the bet. Here's the block print. You can see it's very squarish looking. And then the script form is more curvy, and because of the way we write, we don't have to pick the pen or pencil up off the paper. It just went continuously, whereas with the block print, we had to lift the pen and come over here and make our bottom line. You can work through all the forms of the letters here and the correct way to make them, but while you're copying them into your workbook, be saying the name of the letter and be saying the sound or sounds that the letter makes. Another thing that you can do to study the alphabet is at Learning Activity 2. These are basically our flashcards, and it comes up with the consonant list, and if you just click on the next button, it will go through the alphabet in order. Now you can see that we had the letter bet twice, so that's because it makes two different sounds, and this is a way for you to be quizzed not just on the names of the letters but also the sounds that they make. So our answer here has the name of the letter. Here's the letter in Hebrew. This is the transliteration value. It's not very much emphasized in the book, but the transliteration gives you the same letter in English. Like here's bet with a line under it. Here's bet. Here there's a dot. We'll learn about the dot in a second. And we're using the letter B in both cases. But when it is like this with the line under it, you can see it's a different sound. And so there's a pronunciation guide down here. You can also hear the name of each letter pronounced by clicking on the speaker icon. And so you can go through all of them in order, which is, another way. If you've got the tune of whatever song that you're working with in your mind, you can just kind of click through this and be singing the song to yourself. But once you have an idea, a pretty good idea of the letters, then you can start going through randomly and say, well, do I recognize this letter? And you might find once you do that, it's like, I think it's a such and such, but it does look a lot like, for example, here this is a pay, but it does kind of look like a kaf or in a couple of other letters. And so this way you can be quizzing yourself on what they are. Once you feel really confident and it's like, I don't want to be bothered by seeing bet again because I really know bet, start using this button, random no repeat, and it will
kick it out of the list. So you can see now our set is finally getting smaller each time we do that. But if you came here and you saw this, which is a pay in final position, and you thought it was a tsadi or something like that, and then you see the answer and you think, oh man, I want to keep it in the list, just hit this other random button, right? You can see we went to a new letter, but we've got the same number left here. You can do the same thing for vowels. As long as we're here, I'll just explain the interface. Here we're using a box to represent any consonant, and below it is the vowel, and then the name of the vowel will appear here. You can click on the speaker button to hear it pronounced. This is the transliteration value and its length, and then this is an example of how it's pronounced. But let's do the same thing with the vowels that we did for you with the consonants. Here we are back at our text scroll study sheets, and I'm going to read through the names of the Hebrew vowels. This is kametz gadol, patach, chataf patak, chirik yod, or chirik without the yod, chirik, tsere yod, and tsere without the yod, segol, chataf segol, shurik, kibbutz, cholam vav, and cholam without the vav, kametz chatuf, chataf kametz, vocal shava, and silent shava. Let me make a few comments about the vowels. First one is kind of a minor thing related to how to spell them. We're using transliteration values here, so an H with a dot underneath would be a chet, and the T with a dot underneath is a tet and not a tav. But it's very common to spell these words just with regular English letters and not have the dots underneath. What about the S with a dot under it? Well, that's for a tsadi, so it has the TS sound. So in various books you might see it spelled this way, or you might see it spelled with a TS or even a TZ. You see that we've divided the vowels into groups based on class and length. These three are A-class vowels, these are E-class vowels, these are U-class vowels. Each of these groups is divided into long, short, and half vowels, and in the case of E and U-class vowels, there are two sets of long and short before we come to the half vowel. Additionally, there's a really short vocalic slur that is called a vocal shava, and then there is another shava which is a silent shava. We'll talk about the difference between those in a second. So let's come back here to the top. The kametz gadol, patach, and chataf patak all make the same sound. They all make the ah sound as in father. You just hold it out for a longer or a shorter amount of time when you're saying the word. This is an English letter A. It's not making the A sound. It's not making the ah sound like in cat either. In all cases, this is making an ah sound. For the E-class vowels, we start with chirik yod and chirik without the yod. And when we have the long chirik, it makes the E sound like the second I in intrigue. But when you look at the chart, you say, hey, the next line is chirik again without the yod. The sound is like the first I in intrigue. It's the is sound, but you've got to be saying to yourself, what gives here? How do I tell them apart, etc.? Well, in the short term, anytime that you see a chirik and it doesn't have the yod, assume that it's short. Most of the time, when we have the long chirik, it has the yod, and if the scribes have omitted the yod, in fact, we'll call it defectively written. But when we know a little bit more about Hebrew, we will know when certain words expect a long vowel, and when we see that, and we are expecting a long vowel, and we see the chirik, we'll say to ourselves, oh, this must be one of the places where they omitted or forgot to put in a yod, and I just know to pronounce this chirik as long. But for now, if you see chirik without yod, assume it's short. Same thing with tsere yod or tsere. Tsere in both cases is the long sound A. I know it's written with an English E, but the sound it's going to make is A, like in hey. When this shortens, it's going to go to a segol. So at least here we have a visual difference. If they've forgotten the yod, but it has become short, we have an extra dot on the bottom. And so, by the way, chirik yod, when it's that long vowel, when it moves from long to short, becomes chirik short. Tsere, when it moves from long to short, becomes segol. In either case, when we get down to a half vowel, we will get a chataf sagol. So it will be half of the sound of an E in get. The U-class vowels also have two sets of vowels that are long and short. So if we had a long shuruk and it needed to become shorter, it would become a kibbutz. If we had a cholam, whether it's a cholam vav or just a cholam, if it needed to become shorter, it would become a kametz chatuf. And in both cases, if it was to reduce to a half vowel, it would become a chataf kametz. Let's talk about their sounds a little bit more. The shuruk and the kibbutz both make the U sound. The issue is just how long do you hold it out. And then when you look at kibbutz, you see that it can either be long or short, and you think, well, what gives with that? It's similar to the issue that we had with chirik yod versus chirik, but being the long chirik. It's a kind of a writing convention. So vav with dot in it was used to represent the shuruk, but in some cases they didn't put the vav in, and so if they needed to put the u vowel, they would be stuck writing a kibbutz. And then we would just know, because the structure of the word calls for a long vowel, that it's long or short. Cholam vav, again, we have cases where they failed to write the vav, but we do have the O sound, the long O sound, so we just get the dot without the vav. Kametz chatuf, it's also making an O sound. It's the short O like in bottle, but you might be saying to yourself, hey, the kametz chatuf looks a lot like the kametz gadol, and you're right, they look exactly the same. And if you think about it, they also sound quite a lot alike. You think about father and bottle, those sounds are very similar. And so you're wondering, how are we going to be able to tell the two apart? When should I be knowing it's long ah? When is it short o? And that'll come more in Chapter 2 when we learn about syllable structure, to know when to expect long versus short. For the moment, you should assume that any kametz that you see is the long ah kametz, and the vast majority of them are. And unless you've got a pronunciation guide, for example, there'll be a vocabulary word at the end of the chapter that uses a kametz chatuf, and the pronunciation guide will tell you that this is the short O vowel. But other than that, just assume that it's long for right now. Then vocal shava. So if we have any of these long vowels that get short and really short, they might reduce down to a vocal shava. So we illustrate this with the word tomato. I can say tomato and you hear the O after the T, but I can also say tomato or potato, where I have a little vocalic something after the first letter, but it doesn't really sound like an O at all, and that's what a vocal shava is. So there will be times when the language community really reduces a vowel, but doesn't reduce it to nothing, and that's represented by these two dots stacked on top of each other as a vocal shava. Now you might also notice that for the half vowels, chataf patak, chataf sagol, and chataf kametz, that each case is a composite of two things. You see the short vowel, right? There's patak, and that's in here. And you see the short vowel sagol, and that's in here. And you see the short vowel kametz chatuf, and that's in here. And then right next to it, a shava has been written. So that's a way that they're indicating half vowel, is to take the short vowel and then write the shava sign next to it. Then we've got this other tricky little thing, which is a silent shava. It looks just exactly like the vocal shava, but it doesn't make a sound. Its job is to tell you that a syllable has ended on the consonant above it, and then you're not supposed to pronounce anything. Again, we'll start learning about syllable structure in Chapter 2. It'll make it a lot easier to tell the difference between them. But there are a few rules of thumb to start with in Chapter 1. And those are that if you are following a short vowel, that you should expect that it's a silent shava. That works for now. Eventually that will break down. And if you're following a long vowel, then expect that you have a vocal shava. Again, that'll break down later on, but for the moment that'll work. If you had two shavas in a row, you would assume that the first one was silent and the second one was vocal. That is to say, the first one is ending a syllable, and the second one is beginning a syllable. It's just beginning it with a vocalic slur. And then lastly, if you find a shava under the very first letter of a word, you should assume that it's a vocal shava. Now, don't want to have a big mental task on all of that. These are just basic pronunciation things. If you have a consonant starting your word, and all Hebrew words start with a consonant, you couldn't put a silent shava under it. There'd be no way to pronounce it, right? Consonants have to have some kind of vocalic sound on one side or the other in order to be pronounced. So anytime the word begins with a letter over shava, it's always a vocal shava. As long as we're here, let's take a look at those three dots that we have to learn. The dagesh lene, the dagesh forte, and the mappiq. Now they're all dots and they all look identical, so what we need to do is learn the environment that they appear in so that we know what job is being performed. First, what is the job of the dagesh lene? Well, it's telling you that certain letters are to be pronounced as stops. Those letters are bet, gimel, dalet, kaf, pei, and tav. And we take the English equivalent of those letters and make an acronym. So B, G, D, K, P, or PH here, and T, begad kafat. These are the begad kafat letters. That is the only environment that dagesh lene can appear in. Let's take a look at the pronunciation issue. So here's the letter bet with that dagesh in it, and it has the b sound. Here's the letter bet without the dagesh in it, and it has the v sound. What makes the difference? Well, if the bet is following a consonant, or if the bet is following a major pause between words, right? If bet is beginning our word, and like say we just finished a sentence on the word before that, we've had a big pause. So we have stopped our breath, as it were, and we're starting up with the letter bet. It's going to be pronounced like a B. If the previous syllable ended in a vowel, or if the previous word ended in a vowel and there wasn't a big pause between that word and the letter bet, then the vowel, which that's where we have breath moving, is on a vowel, will keep the dagesh out of there, and you can hear it in the sound because I can keep breath moving through a V sound, but I can't keep breath moving through a B sound. It's always a hard sound. So sometimes we will call the B sound a stop. Sometimes we'll call it a hard consonant. The V sound then might be called a spirant or a soft B sound. And so we have the 6 letters, and there would be different ways that they could be pronounced, but over time those distinctions have fallen away. So for example, the gimel is going to be pronounced g, whether it's got dagesh lene or not. These days the dalet is pronounced the same way. In biblical times, the dalet in this position, dalet following a vowel, not having a dagesh lene, it would have been a hard th, like in then. And your professor might want you to pronounce it distinctly that way, and if that's what your professor wants you to do, you should do that. We also have a difference in the letter kaf. When it's following a vowel, like it's ending a syllable or something like that, then it will make the same sound that chet does. And so just like the Scottish CH and Lach, or the German CH and Johann Sebastian Bach, both the letter chet make that sound, and kaf makes that sound at the end of a syllable. Although this distinction also is kind of falling away, and you may find that people pronounce kaf at the end of a syllable or at the end of a word, just like they do anywhere else as a K. The letter pei is another one that we have a distinction for. Without the dagesh lene, where there's a vowel and there's breath moving, we get the f sound, which could be written with an F in English, but we write it usually with a PH just to show its connection to the letter pei. And then finally tav, and these days tav is pronounced like a T in any position. but it will not have a dagesh lene, again, if it's following a vowel. And it will have the dagesh lene if it is following a consonant or a pause. In times past, this was a soft th, like at the end of with. And so that's the begad kafat letters. Only those 6 letters, bet, gimel, dalet, kaf, pe, and tav, and only following a stop, which usually means following a syllable that ended in a consonant, but it could be following a different word that there's a long pause after it. Well, then we have the dagesh forte, and these can occur in almost any letter, including all of the begad kafat letters. So what is the environment that we have to learn to know when we've got a dagesh forte? And it is this. The dagesh forte follows a full vowel. Now, we just got done talking about vowels, and we had long vowels, short vowels, half vowels, and then the vocalic slur. So when we say a full vowel, we just mean a long vowel or a short vowel. So a dagesh forte, its job is to tell you that, hey, we've saved space. We wrote the consonant once, but we're going to pronounce it twice. And we're going to indicate that by putting a dot in it, a dagesh forte. So again, the dagesh lene, only these 6 letters, and it follows a consonant that ended the previous syllable. Dagesh forte can go in almost any letter, but it always follows a full vowel. In fact, that's a good acronym for us to learn to keep them apart. Forte follows a full vowel. And finally, we have the mappiq, and mappiq can only occur in the letter hey, and it can only occur in the letter hey at the end of a word. A lot of words are going to end with a hey, most often a kametz hey, sometimes a segol hey, and we don't really pronounce that hey. It's just part of a writing convention. When we do need to pronounce it, and the scribes are telling us you need to pronounce this one, they put a dot in it, we call it a mappiq, and so then we actually pronounce it. So let me give you an example. Hey at the end of a word without the mappiq would be like malka, which happens to be the word for queen. But if the hey at the end of that had a mappiq, it would be malkah, right? I kind of overpronounced it there, but you can hear that I'm pronouncing it. And now it would mean her king. It's no longer the same word. We've got a pronominal suffix on the end. In fact, most of the time when you see a hey at the end of a word with a mappiq in it, it's going to be a third feminine singular pronominal suffix, but we'll learn that in chapter 6. All right, so those are the 3 dots. Dagesh lene, only in these letters, only following a stop, such as a syllable ending in a consonant. Dagesh forte doubles a letter. It has to follow a vowel. Forte follows a full vowel. And mappiq can only occur in hey, and it can only occur at the end of a word, and it tells you to pronounce that hey. That hey is not a mater lectionis, right? Mater lectionis is Latin for mother of reading, and it just means this letter is only here as a reading guide. It's not to be pronounced. On that topic, let's come back to our vowel chart where we see some yods, which we learned as part of the alphabet, and some vavs that we learned as part of the alphabet occurring in our vowel list. In these cases, these are mater lectionis. They are letters that are helping us read. They're indicating a vowel, or they're indicating the vowel class to us, and they are no longer consonants. They are part of the vowel, or in the case of Shurik, with this is a different dot, it is the vowel rather than a consonant. And again, as long as we're here, we may as well comment on the final forms that some of these letters have. That means when it is the last letter of the word, it's written a little bit differently, and you can see that that difference is the bottom of the letter goes down straight in most cases, and it extends below the imaginary line that all these letters are sitting on. Now, just as a point of interest perhaps, this is the original form of the letter, but when it was the first letter of a word or the middle letter of a word, and since we're writing from right to left, the scribes developed a habit of taking the bottom part and making this horizontal stroke as they're moving up to begin the next letter. And so these forms here in the main column that we call the initial or the medial form for kaf and nun and pe and sadi, they're all taking the bottom of the letter and making a horizontal stroke from right to left. And it's just something that developed over time about how they wrote. The letter mem, it's not like that. It wasn't sticking below the line, but you can see that they do close it off. It can make it look like a somic, so you have to be careful. Mem is a much more of a box shape than a somic is, and that's the difference between them. Okay, we're going to go back to text scroll now, and we're going to talk about the rest of what we can do to be learning the alphabet and the vowels, because we're trying to learn to read words. So when we're confident that we know the consonants and the vowels, we can come to these phonics lists. So in each of these lists, there's a set of English words that all share the same vowel, and you can use this as a way to practice your reading. So here we're at the chirik list. We have a gimel, below it is the chirik, and last is a bet, and there's no dagesh lene in there because we're following a vowel. If there had been a dagesh in there, it would have been a dagesh forte, and the word would have needed to be longer because you can't say two B's in a row. Setting that aside, if we click for our answer, you can see that we've spelled the English word give, and we've also put the transliteration in there so that you kind of can affirm, yes, this is a bet, and that's a B kind of thing, and we put the line under it to let you know it's the pronunciation of the V. Now, you can see there's a lot of words in here. The goal is really not that you go through every single one of these in order. The idea is that you can come back to these lists for brief periods multiple times, and if you use the random button, you should get a different experience each time you go through. So if I came through here and I did 10 of these, and then later in the day or tomorrow I came back to this list and I did 10 more, I would have a different experience because I used the random button. For you overachievers who want to do them all, you can just use the random no repeat and it'll work its way down until you don't have any left, or you can just go through in order to begin with. That's fine. So again, we're reading from right to left, and our vowels are usually written below. Sometimes next to, for holum, it's going to be written above, but right to left and kind of up and down in order to get the vowels. The pronunciation is kind of confirmed to you because you should know the English word, but the next level is to move on to Hebrew words, and here the pronunciation is going to be reinforced by using the audio button. So here we have the letter mem, giving us the M sound, and then we have a chirik yod as our vowel, and that makes the long E sound. So we can click here and we can hear me. Now maybe I'll do that a little bit louder. Me. And so that kind of confirms to us whether or not we have pronounced the word correctly. We'll also be able to see the transliteration value by clicking the next button. And then we can graduate to two-syllable words, and this is a good opportunity to reinforce what it means to read from right to left. So this is our first letter. It's a gimel. It has a dagesh lene in it because there's nothing here. So we're pretending that we've had a major pause between the last word and this one, and so we need the hard G sound. Underneath of it is a kametz. By default, you should be expecting all the kametzes or kametzim that you see to be long ah, except when you are actually in the kametz chatuf list. All right, so this is the long ah. Here's dalet. This symbol here is just where we're showing the accented syllable. Then we have a cholam vav and a lamed. So G, A, D, O, L, gadol. And then I can click here to see the transliteration and click here gadol to hear it pronounced and get confirmation of whether or not I'm doing it correctly. There are a couple of other things for us to learn in this chapter, which are the weak consonant behaviors and the vowel preferences. We don't have to have those totally mastered right now, but we need to have the basic information in our heads so that in the next several chapters, when we see them show up in various environments, we'll be able to say, oh yeah, that was a case of such and such. And it was something that I learned back here in chapter 1. We're going to start with the vowel preferences because we've already kind of bumped into them. You can see that for the E-class vowels, the chirik yod and the tzere yod include a consonant as part of writing out the vowel, and then you see a vav in both the shurik and in the cholam. So that's just an indicator that those consonants have certain vowel preferences. The consonant yod prefers an environment with E-class vowels, and the consonant vav prefers an environment with U-class vowels. That will make more sense down the line, but it's very apparent when you see that some of the vowels are actually written with those consonants. Gutturals are a slightly different thing. Gutturals are the letters Aleph, Hey, Chet, Ayin, and Resh. Aleph, Hey, Het, and Ayin are all made way back in the throat, which is where A-class vowels are made. So eventually we're going to find that we learn a certain word pattern, and that word pattern asks for a certain vowel in a certain place. And it's not going to be an A-class vowel most of the time. Say it's a chirik. But then when there is a guttural in that spot, the guttural is going to say, I just can't do a chirik right now. I'm made way back here and I need an ah vowel, and then the word's going to have a patak instead. And again, that'll be fleshed out more in the future. The point is that gutturals will sometimes take an ah vowel when we were expecting something different, and it's just because of where those consonants are made in the back of our throat. Now for the weak consonants themselves, you can see that most of the time we're talking about a consonant over top of shava. So nun over shava, vav over shava, yod over shava, or a guttural over shava. Those make up most of our weak consonant issues. And so what happens is when a nun is over shava, it turns into a dagesh forte in the following letter. An example would be insha became isha. And this is the word for woman. You see a dagesh forte in that shin, so you know that you're supposed to pronounce two shins, but the first of those shins was originally a nun. The consonant vav, when it closes a syllable, meaning it's over a silent shava, is normally going to turn into a cholam vav. So this is a regular feature when you have a syllable that had a patak or a kametz. So this would have been tavra, and it becomes Torah. When we have a yod over a silent shava, the vowel that it ends up becoming might be different depending on what was preceding it to begin with. If you have a patak preceding that yod, we're going to end up with a tsere yod. If you had a chirik preceding that yod, you might end up with a tsere, this time usually without the yod, or you might have a chirik yod. And so the yod is still there, but it's no longer being a consonant. It's become part of the vowel. So for now, you just want to be able to say to yourself, nun over shava turned into a dagesh forte. Vav over silent shava turns into a cholam. Yod over a silent shava turns into a tsere yod, a tsere, or a chirik yod. But it turns into an E-class vowel that you might have written the yod with. When gutturals take a shava, they can't really take a vocal shava. That's what all these chataf vowels were for. We have a patak next to a shava. We have a segol next to a shava. We have a kametz chatuf next to a shava. Those are put together and they make a new symbol. And those are there only for the gutturals. Those symbols don't occur with any of the other letters. It's just, again, where gutturals are made in the throat, it's hard to have something so small as a vocal shava associated with it. And so they get a half vowel instead of the vocalic slur, and when it's a half vowel, there's enough stuff there to know whether it's A class, E class, or U class. If it was a silent shava, they might accept the silent shava, or they might give us one of these. They're called composite shavas because it's a composite of the short vowel and the shava, or sometimes they're just called chataf vowels. So most of our weak consonant behaviors are some letter over shava, and we just want to be able to say what happens quickly, and then when we bump into it in future chapters, it'll start to make more sense what's going on. Gutturals have a second weak behavior, which is that they cannot take a dagesh forte. And this is where resh joins the crowd. Resh will also not take a dagesh forte. So the presence or absence of the dagesh is a graphic issue, whether or not there's a dot. Phonetically, what it means is that these letters can't be doubled in pronunciation, therefore there's no dot indicating doubling. There's a second phonetic consequence, which is that if the pattern has called for doubling of that letter and we can't double it, the previous vowel will be lengthened much of the time. So for example, here is a pattern that we're going to learn way back or way ahead in chapter 16. We'll have a prefix with a vocal shava, right? Because at the beginning of a word, every shava needs to be a vocal shava. And the first root letter in the word is going to have a patak, and the second root letter is going to have a dagesh forte. Well, if that second root letter is a guttural, it's going to reject the dagesh forte, and as a consequence, the patak in front of it is going to be lengthened to kamates, and we call that compensatory lengthening. Right? That's one of the reasons why we need to know these sequences. If we have a patak, it needs to be lengthened. It's going to become a long kamates, a kamates gadol. Sometimes, however, the lengthening will not occur, but because there's still not a dagesh in there, it's called virtual doubling or sometimes semi-doubling, because the theory is that the speakers were doing enough of something with that guttural that they kept the vowels short. And right now you just want to be able to say gutturals reject dagesh forte, and we either have compensatory lengthening, which is that the previous vowel becomes lengthened, or we get virtual doubling, which is that nothing else happens except there's not actually a dagesh there. We're going to see that playing out in future chapters. Right now we just kind of want to have that rule rolling around in the back of our head so that when it comes up in practice, we can say, oh yeah, that's what's going on. It's guttural not taking dagesh. Let's take a look at our vocabulary in text scroll. If we click on Learning Activity 3, it pulls up a list of all the vocabulary words that occur in the textbook at the end of Chapter 1. We can go through those in the same order that occur in the textbook using the front and back arrows, but if we want to have a scrambled list, we simply click on this button here, and now it will have a different sequence that occurs in the book. And you're going to learn it much better if you use a scrambled list than if you just learn to go through in a particular order all the same time. At the time of making this video, the audio button was not working yet, but we hope that it will be soon. Then you'll be able to hear the pronunciation of each of your vocabulary words. As long as it's available, you might even want to go and look at the older interface. The vocabulary component here uses the exact same font that occurs in your textbook, which is the New Jerusalem ASCII font by Linguist Software. The new programming environment for the upgraded text scroll will not permit us to put that font in there, but you might want to use this while it's available just for the familiarity of the look of the letters. One thing that you will lose is when we have the answer and there would be Hebrew here, it's not going to look right for one of a couple of different reasons. But up here, the main vocabulary word is going to look just as you would see it in your textbook. You can go through the list in order. You can go through the list randomly using this random button. And when you come to the point where you don't want to go in order and you don't want to repeat words that you do know, use this button that says go random and don't repeat, and you can see that the number of words in the set gets smaller each time. If you do come to a word, like let's say you don't remember that chokmah means wisdom, you click here and you say, oh, it does mean wisdom, but you had forgotten it, you want to keep it in the list, go ahead and click here. It stays in the list. You can see that there's still 20 here, and I'm just going to pretend that I miss a couple. Miss that one, miss this one. Let's see, I think we already said we missed that one. We'll say that I missed this one, and then we'll just get rid of the list. All right, so we're at the end, and I can click on any of these buttons, and now I've got a list of the 4 words that I had missed, and I can practice those as a separate exercise. And finally, we can practice our Hebrew vocabulary words in context. If we go to Learning Activity 4, we get a list of verses which are mostly translated into English but have 1, 2, or even 3 Hebrew words remaining. Here's Deuteronomy 5:31. Stand here by me so that I can tell you every mitzvah which you shall teach them, that they should do them in the eretz which Anoki am giving to them to possess. Then we need to remember that mitzvah means commandment, eretz means land, and Anoki means I. If we click next, we'll see an answer, and that will have the translation there for us. But we're seeing the same vocabulary words that we've just been learning as a list of possible meanings in the context of actual sentences, and that really does help us. In the newer interface, it's going to look like this. It's the same concept and the same set of verses, just a sleeker design, and it should be working on your mobile device. When you are doing your workbook, as I said, where you're going to copy the letters and say their names and sounds and then add the vowels, you're also going to copy out the vocabulary words that you're supposed to learn by the end of this chapter. And all of the letters of the alphabet and all of the vowels occur in the words of this list. This would be a case where the kamates is the short O kamates. All the rest of them in this list are going to be the long A kamates. So this is chokmah, right? Even the kamates at the end of this is the long A kamates. But those are there's a pronunciation guide in the book for you on those. And then also you'll be copying out a couple of Hebrew verses. Notice that this is a good place to study some of the distinctions. There's certain letters that are just easy to confuse. Vav, Zayin, final Nun, they look a lot alike. It's like they're a vertical stroke. So you can kind of study the distinctions here as another way to be learning the alphabet. Okay, now it's time for you to get busy doing the work that it takes to accomplish the objectives of Chapter 1. Learn the consonants and the vowels, their names, their sounds, how to write them, and how to recognize and read them. Know the 3 dots, have a basic familiarity with the 6 weak consonant behaviors, and also the 3 vowel preferences. When you're able to look at and read your vocabulary correctly with ease, then you know that you've mastered the content of Chapter 1. Have fun!